Hello and welcome back as we continue with Phantom. Ever since he was old enough to walk, I had taken the precaution of locking Erik in his room at night, partly for his protection, but chiefly for my own peace of mind. He was 8 when I made the unwelcome discovery that barred windows and a locked door were no longer sufficient to contain his captive imagination. Father Mansart came to me one morning in considerable anxiety, telling me there was a great unrest in the village and that I must take more to keep Erik inside at night. I don't understand you, I frowned. You must know quite well that he is never permitted to go beyond the garden. The priest shook his head. Madeleine, he has been seen by more than one person in the church grounds, and last night several witnesses insist they heard the organ playing at midnight. But that's not possible, Father, I protested. I myself locked him in his room last night at 8 o'clock. Did you leave the key in the door? Yes, but that's exactly where I found it this morning. Even if he had contrived to push the key from the lock and slide it underneath the door, he could hardly have locked himself in there again once more. I fear with Erik all things are possible, said the priest gravely. I think I better talk to him. To my intense dismay, Erik made no attempt to deny his escape. He admitted it quite freely and only bowed his head when Father Mansart rebuked him for the sin of deceit. I wasn't doing any harm, he protested, looking at me anxiously as though he expected me to beat him in front of the priest. Then what exactly were you doing? I shouted. There were foxes in the forest, he said quietly. I like to watch their cubs play in the moonlight. Last spring He stopped, aghast at my expression. I could not believe that he had been roaming as far as Forêt du Romer for a year or more without my knowledge. I saw very clearly then what happened, how his gradually mounting confidence had persuaded him to venture deeper and deeper into the village, where the beautiful Romesque church pulled like a lodestar. How did you get out of your room? I demanded. Oh, that's easy. I just unscrewed the bars on the window and jumped on the tree outside. I closed my eyes in horror. His room was at least 20 feet above ground, and the tree he referred to was far enough away from the window to make the jump positively suicidal to anything but a cat. I didn't bother how he managed to get back in. No doubt it was a method equally lunatic. You stupid boy! You could have been killed! She doesn't want him dead, but she also doesn't want him around. He looked at the door. Everything is so beautiful at night, and no one sees me, he murmured. Well, last night you were not only seen, you were heard. I snapped. By now the entire village must know you were playing the organ in the church. Oh, he said miserably. I thought if anyone heard, they would think it was a ghost. Erik, said Father Mansart, intervening hastily as he saw me clenching my fist. What you have been doing is very foolish and puts both you and your mother at risk. It must not occur again. If you continue to alarm the village in this fashion, there may be unpleasant reprisals. Erik made an instinctive movement toward me and then froze. You understand what I mean by reprisals, don't you, child? Yes, Erik said with equal horror. But why? Why do they want to hurt me? I haven't done any harm. Why do they all hate me? The priest spread his hands uncomfortably. Men hate things they fear, and they fear those things which they do not understand. Erik touched his mask hesitantly. My face, he faltered. They hate me because of my face. Father Mansart took his arm. Come, child, let us pray. We shall ask God to grant you patience and understanding. No! Erik pulled away from his grasp abruptly. I'm not going to pray any more. Why should I? God doesn't listen to me. Erik, I gasped, you will apologize to Father Mansart immediately and beg God's forgiveness for such blasphemy. He was stubbornly silent. Go to your room, I said icily. I will deal with your disobedience later. There was an appalled silence when he had left us. I sank to the hearth-side chair and stared at the priest. What can we do? I breathed. He must not be allowed to leave the house again, said Father Mansart after a moment. I will return later to board up his window and place bolts on the door. Board up his window, I echoed I echoed wretchedly. Must I now put him in a room without natural light? I fear there was no other way to protect him, the priest said sadly. That night there was a great disturbance outside in the road, a crowd of village boys throwing stones and shouting obscene abuse. I was so furious that in spite of the priest's warning, I threw open my bedroom window and challenged them. Go away, I screamed. Go away and leave me and my son in peace. Bring out the monster, they chanted rudely in response. Bring out the monster and let us see him, lady. A clod of filth struck me on the cheek. I heard the sound of a downstairs window smashed and held my breath with terror as someone began kicking my front door. Be off with you, stormed Father Manzar's voice from a little distance down the road. You young devils, I promise you this night will earn you penance enough to keep you on your knees for a month. And yes, I know your names, every one of you. Be off, I say. The voices grew fainter and less belligerent as their owners skulked away in the falling dust. Running down the narrow staircase, I wrenched open the front door and buried my face against the priest's habit. Oh, Father, I thought they were going to come into the house and take him. I don't think they would dare go that far, my dear, but certainly I couldn't answer what they'd do if they caught him wandering around alone. Is he safe upstairs? I nodded. Good. I shall remove the glass from his window and fit a bolt at the top and bottom of his door. I think that will contain him. Indeed, it may be well after tonight he will be too frightened to escape of him. What is to become of him? I whispered in despair. What in God's name will become of him? It is not for us to foresee the future, replied the priest evasively. I will go with him now, if I may. I rather think I shall find him ready to pray once more by now. I tried to smile faintly. You have forgiven him for his blasphemy, then? He made a philosophical gesture. If that is all heaven has ever required to forgive him, we shall be fortunate indeed, he said. And taking the candle from my nerveless hand, he lit his way to the top of the house without another word. On Sunday, I walked down into the village with Marie to shame the parents of our tormentors. It was some years now since I had worshipped in the magnificent abbey of St. George's de Bacheville. Content to hear Mass like an invalid in the privacy of my own home, I allowed myself to increasingly assume the habits of a recluse. And I began to see there was perhaps some justification for the general belief that a madwoman and a monster inhabited the secluded house on the outskirts of the village. I must not continue to hide away like a mole in its burrow. I must show that I was prepared to fight for our right to be left in peace. Okay, one thing I've wondered is how does she, grocery shop? I mean, I know she has to leave for food, but, Throughout the service, I was aware of heads turning fervidly in my direction. A muted whispering permeated the sermon, and even the priest's steely gaze was not sufficient to quell it. My resolve trembled, and I had a horrible urge to run off to the old church. But I still sat there stiffly, with my gloved hands folded over my prayer book, willing the service to come to an end. "It, Missa, it," said Father Mansard at merciful length, and as the congregation shuffled its feet, I avoided the communal gaze by staring fixedly at the cherubs which I decorated the transept. Following Marie into the nave, I dropped my prayer book in my agitation, and the reverberating thud echoed unnaturally loud up to the vaulted roof. My glance went automatically to the gallery, and in the softest light from the clerestory window, I saw the figure of a young man looking down on me thoughtfully. He made a formal little bow when I realized I had seen him, and the unfamiliar courtesy of his gesture covered me with confusion. I had forgotten how to respond to such gestures in my years of solitude, forgotten how to play the simpering, empty-minded coquette. I felt extremely uncomfortable, and yet it was very hard to break that first revealing moment of eye contact. "Who is that man?" I asked Marie, as we walked out of the fierce sunlight which was bathing in the village green. She smiled. "That is the new doctor, Monsieur Barre." "How long has he been in Boscherville?" About 2 months, but they say he will not say. I believe he has very few patients because everyone still prefers to call in Dr. Gautier. How stupid, I said rather more sharply than I had meant to. Dr. Gautier was in his dotage 10 years ago. The man must be 80 at least. Marie shrugged. Well, you know what the village is. Mama says she would never dream of being examined by such a young man, and she would certainly not permit him to attend to me. What does your mama suggest the young man do in the meantime? Is he to starve in the gutter until his beard turns gray? Hush, Marie said urgently. He's coming out. He'll hear you. Against all the instincts of good breeding, I turned to look and found the young man's eyes once more fixed upon mine. Again, he made that elegant little bow and bade us a good morning before going on his way with obvious reluctance. Marie took my arm with one accord as we began to hurry down away from the retreating figure. Suddenly, inexplicably, I found myself giggling, like the silly, frivolous creature I had once been. Suddenly, I was back in the convent, half-heartedly denying my interest in a handsome singing master. But of course I don't care for him. Not a bit, not a bit. 17 once more. A pert little butterfly testing her wings after the restrictive, chrysalis years of a strict Catholic upbringing. 17 and ready to devour life in one eager, greedy swallow. The dusty, sun-baked road outside my house swam abruptly back in my vision, and the sun winked on the new pane of glass that Erik had fitted into the dining room window. 8 years old, Rory, who's as swift and as efficient on simple tasks as the best workman in the village. Why did I have the guilty feeling that I was about to commit the ultimate betrayal of his trust? Okay, that's the end of that. See you next time.